Good afternoon. My name is Marshall Madical. Today I'll be discussing music's impacts during the stages of grief. We often say music soothes the soul, but for someone grieving, it means something deeper. The moment they put the headphones on, it gives them a safe place when it feels like the world is ending. With over 94% of those in grief turning to music for comfort at home or during isolated journeys. Yet question remains about how it actually shapes emotions during the classic stages of grief. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Diana Bowery, a psychologist with a PhD from Victoria University of Wellington, presents music can foster bonds between people and communicate values and identity, demonstrating a connection between different types of music and the levels of social connection. In addition, a 2022 statement says the American Red Heart Association concluded that social isolation and loneliness are common yet under-recognized determinants of cardiovascular health and brain health. This leads me to my research question. How does music influence emotional processing during the stages of grief? To answer this question, a social-cultural standpoint must be taken into consideration. Author Kelly Jr. Morrell, professor of health, community, and technology at the University of Cincinnati, interviewed 28 participants to recognize how they incorporated music into their grief journeys. Participants reported using music to recover lost connections with deceased loved ones, hold a sense of co-presence, regulate both positive and negative moods, and host feelings that help them cope with sadness. However, sometimes certain songs may intensify grief. While not all music provides relief, some may raise the stress levels rather than reduce it. Music can be a huge help to remember the loved ones who have passed away, help with the healing process during mourning and loss, and emotional regulation. Furthermore, Laura DeMaio, a board-certified music therapist who has spent over 16 years working in hospice care as a bereavement manager and grief choir leader, found her 2017 study that 94% of participants intentionally used music during the grief journey, highlighting unique roles for music that align with the dual processing model of grief by allowing them confronting loss and restoring daily life. A scientific lens must also be considered. Grief is a distressing and universally encountered phenomenon among most people. It is a common natural response to loss, more particularly regarding a loss of a close friend or family member. Lindsay Warrenberg, a PhD researcher at Ohio State University, presents the idea that grieving music aligns with overt emotional displays such as crying or turmoil. In return, this can help externalize and process intense grief emotions. Furthermore, Warrenberg states previous research often lumps sad music together, but Warrenberg argues it supports separate states, melancholy versus grief, unfolding varied responses to sad music, while some may find it comforting or positive. Leah Tarifi, a researcher specializing in music and emotion, finds that 67% of listeners deliberately choose sad music during periods of stress or grief for mood regulation and to work as a consolidator. While David Huron, a leading music psychologist and author of influential theories on music and emotion, explains that music triggers prolactin release, a soothing, tranquilizing hormone that curbs the pain of grief, much like a mother feels when nursing. For a person who has just lost a parent or a close sibling, such music can feel like a safe embrace that mirrors the inner turmoil, letting tears flow freely and helping them feel less alone during the pain of loss, hosting the release of raw emotion and a gentle sense of shared humanity. Individuals experiencing grief must actively use music as a coping mechanism to process emotions and protect their mental well-being. After recognizing the complexity of this issue, I developed two potential solutions. Firstly, listening to music freely, with a custom curated playlist pertaining to the mood. Limitations. Firstly, according to Morel et authors of Uses and Gratifications of Music and Bereavement, a qualitative inquiry, not all individuals respond positively to music during these grieving periods. Some may trigger painful memories and intensify emotional distress rather than relieve it. Secondly, access to appropriate music or the technology and subscriptions to play it may be limited, particularly within those who have worsened economic situations. Implications. Music should be incorporated into grief support programs. as a simple, low-cost tool to help individuals process emotions, regulate mood, and reduce reduce isolation. Counselors and organizations can encourage the use of these custom-curated playlists to support mental well-being during grief. Solution 2. Since the list of limitations outweigh the implications, I developed a stronger solution: dancing freely to music. According to Courtney Perks, a veteran medical and health writer, dancing freely to music allows for emotional release through movement, helping to process grief by express feelings non-verbally. Studies show rhythmic movement reduces cortisol levels and increases endorphins, providing relief from sadness. Limitations. Firstly, physical limitations. Not everyone can dance freely due to mobility issues or health constraints. Secondly, emotional barriers. Some may feel self-conscious or unable to let go in front of others, limiting the effectiveness. Implications. Widespread integration of dance therapy in grief counseling can lead to more holistic healing approaches. I urge grief support centers to incorporate free dance sessions and encourage individuals to create safe spaces at home for movement-based mourning. Researchers published through PubMed found that music supports emotional expression, mood regulation, and social connection during grief, which is reflected in the data presented. Overall, the problem is causing prolonged emotional suffering to those grieving and without changes made to how we approach grief therapy. Individuals continue to struggle with unsolved pain, leading to long-term mental health issues. Evidence used to develop my argument came from these sources. Thank you for your time.
Okay, we'll get started with the questions. Okay, your first question: what information did you need before you began your research, and how did that information shape your research?
I needed basic information on how music helps with grief before I began my research, so I looked up studies on emotional benefits. Researchers published through PubMed found that music supports emotional expression, mood regulation, and social connection during grief, which is reflected in the data presented in my graph, showing high reported impact percentage. This information shaped my research by confirming that music is an effective, accessible coping tool, so I focused my project on encouraging custom-curated playlists more than exploring unrelated methods.
The next question: what advice would you have for other researchers who consider this topic?
My advice for other researchers who consider this topic is to always include both the benefits and limitations of using music for grief. The graph clearly shows a high positive impact across emotional expressions, mood regulations, and reduced isolation, but not everyone responds positively and access barriers exist. This balanced approach would help future studies create a better, more realistic recommendations for programs in this topic.